What's going on, everybody? It's Ronald here. Today we're going to be talking about closing costs for resale real estate. Let's go! So, according to SLLawyer.ca, average closing cost is 1.5 to 4% of purchase price. So, why does it vary so much? I'm going to explain here right now. So, let me look on the low end. In terms of closing costs, there are a few big items. One thing I wanted to note is that your closing costs cannot be borrowed. It must be cash that is sweat equity. Number one is land transfer tax, and this varies based on purchase price, whether you're a first-time home buyer or not, and whether the property is inside or outside Toronto. Lawyer fees is pretty fixed. It would be under 1,000 usually, under 2,000. Most likely it'll be 1.5K for lawyer fees. And number three, we got CMHC home insurance tax. If your down payment is over 20%, you won't need to pay this. And if your down payment is very low, like 5%, then you would need to pay higher CMHC home insurance. So I'm going to go on a calculator later, but basically, first time home buyer, if you buy under 369K, it's going to be almost $0 of land transfer tax because they tax land transfer just like income. And as you can see here, inside Toronto, if you are first-time home buyer, let's say for $500,000, it's going to be $4,000. While for if you're not a first-time home buyer, you have to pay around $12,000 because you don't get the rebates. So now we're going to look at outside of Toronto. And outside Toronto, you see, basically you pay less land transfer tax. See, $500,000 instead of $4,000 is $2,000. And for non-first time home buyer outside Toronto, you pay $6,000 instead of $12,000. Okay. Anyways, so what is Toronto? Where's Toronto? So this is the land transfer tax map. If you are within this red line, then what it means is that you are paying the higher land transfer tax. Okay. So in terms of CMHC insurance, if you're borrowing 400,000, this should be your insurance. The higher the amount is, the higher the PST on the CMHC insurance. So it ranges from 1.2K to around 3,000 for $1 million property. So for over a million, the government requires you to have over 20% down payment. Therefore, CMHC insurance is never going, PST on CMHC insurance is never going to be above $3,000. So let's take a look at a few real life examples now. Let's get started. So here I'm going to use the high end. We're going to have a $500,000 home with 10% down payment. Let's say 8% because that's close to the minimum. Give me 1 sec. Let me just double check the minimum for $500,000. You need 75% down payment. Okay. So sorry, 7.5%. Okay. So your closing costs is going to be $29,000 if you're a first-time home buyer. And here's the breakdown of as you can see, land transfer tax is always the biggest. And second and third are the lawyer fees and the CMHC insurance tax. And this is only PST. So this is going to be 3% of the purchase price. As we saw here, closing costs can be 1.5 to 4%. 4% is for another scenario, which I will show you guys later. So let's look at the low. Let's look at another high-end scenario. If you're not a first-time home buyer, it's going to be $37,000 because you have way more land transfer tax. $32,000 versus $24,000. So see, this is near the high end. If you buy $1 million home, not a first-time home buyer, and inside Toronto, okay, it'll be 3.7. But let's say we buy in another example, we buy a property $350,000. 5% down payment is the lowest possible. And your first-time home buyer, boom, look at that. That's 2.9. And how many percent of the purchase price is this closing cost? Divided by 350. 0.84%. So this is the low end. When you buy a cheap property and you're first-time home buyer, you have lower closing costs because there's no land transfer tax. And the CMHC insurance tax is also less because you're insuring a smaller mortgage. So yeah, this is a low estimation on closing costs. In my opinion, you should always save up, do your calculations very well. On closing day, you're gonna have to have these funds as cash. If you don't have it, you might lose your deposit. And that would be really bad actually. So try to maybe purchase a little bit lower than your max pre-approval and make sure you have a little bit of cash cushion. If you calculate your closing costs to be a certain amount, make sure to have maybe at least 4,000 over in case there's anything that pops up. And let me know if you guys have any questions regarding closing costs for resale real estate. Later, I'll make a video on pre-construction closing costs, and that is a lot higher because there's development levies and other various costs. For pre-construction, the closing costs would be closer to around 5 to 7% of the purchase price compared to 1.5 to 4% of the purchase price. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Take care, everybody.